Welcome to Dying in Grace. This is a program dedicated to helping us explore all aspects of living and dying, of bringing that taboo death out of the closet and into conversation so that we can reintegrate death as part of the life cycle and befriend it and be with one another, since we're all going to face it. My name is Arlene Stepputat, and each week I bring a special guest to tell a unique story about their experience about death and dying and living in grace. And tonight's guest is Jim Sarno. Jim, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And the overarching theme tonight is about befriending your father.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's start with you as a child. Tell us a little bit about your family constellation.
Well, brought up in Southern California, old world Italian Catholic family with my mother's mother living with us.
Extended family.
Yeah,
Don't see that too much anymore.
No, and grandma was very important. Brought up in Italy, very loving but very staunch, perfectionist, artist herself. And she was a dynamic part of our family. Mm-hmm. Very important.
Great. And did you have siblings as well?
Yes, older sister Judy and younger sister Jean, and all of us together had quite a journey.
So I also grew up with a grandmother in my family, and that was a powerhouse. And it does change the dynamic dramatically when there's someone. Was your grandmother maternal or paternal?
Maternal.
Maternal, mine too. So that makes a difference as well. And so you said you had such a journey. Tell us a little bit about you as a kid and how life was for you.
Middle child, so there's a lot that goes with being a middle child, but I was shy, backward, became very creative. The whole family was creative in one sense, with cooking or music or arts. And so my grandmother was a big influence with, I was the little kid at home that she kept occupied with arts and crafts. My mother did the same, and so did my sisters. And so I was that shy little awkward kid, but always into art. Great.
Well, that's good. But you also had shy because of your appearance, as I understand.
Yes. As a child, my ears weren't large, but they stuck out. So you can imagine the nickname I got was Dumbo. And that, it's fun now and it's cute, but as a kid to be called Dumbo, school was hell for me.
Yeah.
Horrible to go.
And you were 5?
5. As soon as I started in school, that nickname was mine and went through all of school with me.
So, living with such a name, you made a unique decision about having that name, which maybe not most kids would not.
No, my mom was great. She kept trying to tell me, other people with large ears, made something of themselves. If you want them pinned back, we can do that. But that wasn't the course. And as I knew my name was Dumbo, my parents, of course, like most parents, took us to Disneyland. When I got there, I said, they all have big ears. Mickey, Minnie, Dumbo, Pluto, and everybody loves them. So, of course, that was the perfect place for me, and I decided at an early age, I think this is what I should be doing, working at this place called Disneyland.
Wow. So that, and so the desire to work at Disneyland, it came because you saw acceptance for how you looked. Like that became normal.
Yeah.
And I think all of us in our childhood, I think none of us gets to grow up without somebody poking fun at us for being something about the way we appear. It's too bad, but it is happens. Kind of the way it goes.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when I think about Disneyland, because you ended up doing that, didn't you?
Yes, it was meant to be, and I pursued it, went to college. I was studying toy design, but realized that was in New York. I did not want to live in New York. So in Hollywood, I thought the studios, and multiple studios eventually ending up at Disney.
Wow, that's amazing. But along the way, before we'll talk about Disney a little bit more later, but you also you went to college for art, so you had a proclivity for art.
Definitely.
But that's not the first path you took.
No, I mean, I was putting myself through school. Art was going to be it, but my father had always wanted to own a deli. And so I had worked in the grocery business, putting myself through college. And when I graduated, he said, I want you to open a deli with me. You have the grocery experience. This is it. This is the family dream. And being Italian, this was it. The father creates the dream and the son follows. So I said, Dad, I don't want to do a deli. And he said, really think about it. This would be good. So I prayed about it, and I felt God had said to me, if you want to get to know this man who has been a stranger to you, I suggest you go into the deli business with him.
So tell me a little bit more about that estrangement. So you're making this decision at 22. So what happened along the way between 5 and 22 that your father, who took you to Disneyland, now is this person who there's great distance with?
Yeah. Well, I was that shy, little awkward kid, not what my father had expected. So I felt the shame from him, that he was ashamed of me as his son. And so there was always strain between us. I wasn't who he wanted me to be. He wasn't quite the father I wanted him to be either. So the two of us never got along. We were always at odds. I remember as a child riding in the car with him, and we didn't say a word to each other. We had nothing in common, nothing to say. So there was always tension. What topped it off was my mother happened to be bipolar. And in her situation she was in, it left my father confused, all of us scrambling to figure out how you dealt with someone being bipolar in your family.
And at the time, was that a diagnosis? I don't even think that word was even said.
No,
I mean, that's a relatively new form. So
manic depressive.
Manic
is what
depressive.
They called it.
And was she diagnosed even, or
diagnosed? And it was the severe shock treatments was the cure. So it was,
wow.
High voltage. I don't know what the voltage was, but it was severe. And so, as teenagers, we watched her go through this. And unfortunately, they let us in to see her being in a padded room, struggling in all kinds of ways with straitjackets, the whole thing. So very disturbing for young kids to experience that.
Oh, that must have been terrible. And I can imagine your father being bewildered and not knowing what to do. And
he was lost.
Yeah. And how about your grandmother in all of this?
Well, my grandmother had cancer. And in those days, they said if she'll live 5 years and not go into any severe cancer situation, if she lives 5 years, she's in remission. So my mother lived with that 5-year diagnosis, never telling her mother, and I think it helped in bring her to the brink. By the time 5 years went by, Grandma was fine. I think Mom had a bit of a breakdown, and that helped snap what was coming.
So your mother kept the secret of the diagnosis.
Yes.
And she had to live with that and just the weight of that.
Yeah, every day thinking, is my mother going to be alive? And they had a strained relationship. So her trying to get her mother's approval, her mother in this horrible situation of cancer diagnosis. So the dynamics between the three adults in the household was stressful, to say the least.
And then the children are left trying to figure it out for themselves with not much guidance.
Right.
And were you siblings? Were you and your siblings close, or so you guys kind of were a united force in a way?
Yeah, and then as time went on, we began raising them because we became the adults and they were the children.
Yeah.
Which happens many times, I think.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And it's the strain of family secrets as well.
Oh, yeah.
And it's done often, I think, out of good intention, but misguided. Like, we want to protect.
Yeah.
We don't want them to get hurt with the truth. Like, Mom couldn't take understanding her real diagnosis, which of course is not the case. But actually, I have an Italian step-grandmother, and it was the same thing. No one ever told Grandma what was going on, except Grandma always knew.
Well, that's how it is. You know, but you don't talk.
Right.
So that silence is a killer.
Yeah.
And so we all knew what was going on. The secret was with the outside world. Don't tell the neighbors. Don't tell your friends. Right. We all know what this is, but we don't talk about it. So, that adds all kinds of tensions. And then my father and I had nothing to talk about with each other until Mom was diagnosed and then in and out of institutions. So my younger sister and I would take him to see her. And there we were, just barely old enough to drive, taking Dad, him having horrendous emotional disturbance about this, and us trying to support him to get through this.
That's such a tremendous load for children. And I've heard these stories over and over again. I mean, it's
not unusual.
It is not unusual, and it's sad. And so during this experience with your mom, your grandmother was okay?
She was okay, but when the 5 years had passed, I think my mother had her fill of protecting her,
right,
and kind of exploded and actually told her, "You've had cancer for 5 years," and
wow.
I kept that from me. So as soon as that was revealed and my mother began to break down, I think my grandmother found her way out through cancer.
Wow.
And so she passed away.
So was your grandmother your first experience of death?
Yes. And my sister and I were just talking about it. Here we were probably 13 and 15. We both felt like we were about 7 years old when she died. She lived with us. They came to get her with a stretcher. She was going to some kind of hospice, whatever there was at that time. We knew she was dying. And there we were alone watching this experience. We had no understanding of it. It was terrifying. And we were half our age inside. That's how we remember it now.
Wow.
So.
Wow. Well, and that's a lot. And then when she passed, do you remember them telling you that she passed away?
Yes. And of course, you know, when you know nothing about it, you don't understand except that she's gone. And we were very close. So it was devastating.
And did you go to her funeral, or did
Yes.
they keep you away? Oh, so you were allowed to mourn her. But
yes. But, you know, a new experience, and what does a kid know to do or how to feel? But first experience, and done clumsily.
yeah.
But that's what children do. You get through it.
Yeah.
You know.
So that gives me great context in understanding why you and your dad were estranged.
Right.
So now we come to 22. You want to be an artist or go pursue that dream, and yet he comes up with the deli idea, and you decide, I'm going to go do the deli.
Yeah. I said, I have a feeling that my answer from God was the right one. And I said, even though I don't want to do this, I want to get to know this man, because I realized that he wasn't going to live forever, and he was somebody that was going to be important to me whether I liked it or not. And while he was alive, I said, my intention is to get to know him, become his friend.
And was your mom still alive at this point?
She was
as well?
still alive. She outlived my father, so she was alive, but going through her own personal hell.
Yeah.
And so at that time, I said, if I do this deli, I am going to pursue a friendship with him and get to know him and get to love him, understand him, and have him get to know me as well. So I became the adult with an intention there.
But it sounds like you were continuing a role that you had assumed much younger. You know, when you're saying you and your siblings were raising your parents, it sounds like you made the adult decision here.
Right.
I'm going to tell him what a great son I am and prove it to him.
I remember specifically needing to hear him say he loved me. So we would work together and we'd go out to eat and we'd talk, and I wanted to hear him say the words, "I love you, Jim." He says, "Well, you know I love you. You're my son. I love you." I said, "I know that, Dad. I need to hear my name in there." And I pushed and pushed until he told me. And for some reason, that was healing for me.
It took a while for him to be able to say that.
Took a while for him to get the words out, but I needed it, and he knew I did. And I actually went at the friendship saying, there must be a problem here with him, from his father, his brothers, his family, that he didn't know how to be a friend to his own children. So I kind of made it my goal to be his friend and understand what happened in his upbringing. And he shared everything with me.
So it sounds like you kind of studied your own family history with great compassion.
Yeah.
I mean, you sort of removed, as I hear it, removed yourself as your sonship. I mean, yes, you had this thing, but like, let me just approach this person as if it was some other man that I met, some other, it's my employer.
Yeah.
You know?
I said, I could tell by this age, I was starting to understand this is a lonely man who never had a friend.
Wow.
And so I said, I'm going to be his friend. And I think when he did pass, I think it was understood that I was probably the only friend he ever had. And that was part of our problem. He didn't know how to relate. He was always good with kids. Once you started to get 12, 13, 14, he didn't know what to do with you because you were an adult now or becoming an adult. He didn't know how to relate to adults.
So he didn't have any other friends, it sounds like.
He had acquaintances, he had friends, but nobody that would say, how are you feeling? What was it like when you grew up? What was your relationship with your father like? So I really said, I'm going to get him to tell me who he is. And then I'll at least say, I knew who he was. I could understand why we had the broken relationship we had.
Well, so much of what you're saying is such a good instruction for all of us. And I think I have this view that none of us has ever gets enough airtime, that we're always kind of trying to steal the focus of a conversation because very few of us ever get listened to all the way through. And that one of the biggest gifts, certainly that people bring to the bedside, but just bring to friendship and any relationship, is the space to hear somebody out without judgment and without agenda and without a goal.
Yeah, I mean, my intent was to become his friend.
Yes.
But the deeper issue was I needed him as my friend. And I thought, I'm not getting this. I don't think he has it to offer. But I did learn a great lesson in life. If you give to someone else what you're needing, it often takes care of what it is you need. And this was the beginning of that proof to me because we became really close friends.
And so, tell me about his passing. Did he die suddenly? Did you have time to sit with him at the bedside, or was it a sudden death? What were the circumstances there?
He had a heart condition, and he was not an older man, but he was having early heart trouble, many heart attacks, and every time he would have one, the doctor would say to us, we don't know if he'll make it through this, so do what you need to do. So this might have happened about 6 times. Now, we had done the deli, we'd gone through all of the repair. I got to tell him the pain of growing up in the household, being left there while he just kind of checked out. So we talked through all these things. By the time we get to these heart attacks, he and I both know it could be any minute. So as the heart attacks repeated themselves, I had worked in the airline business and he wanted to take a trip with me. He said, I'd love to see Hawaii. I said, well, Dad, I don't know if you can take this trip. Well, let's check with the doctor. So they did, and the doctor said, well, it's risky, but if you want to go, go. So we went to Hawaii, the two of us. And, you know, like I say, it was 2 good friends going on a trip together. We had resolved all the issues, we'd forgiven each other, we loved each other. And he made it through the trip, but it was months later that he passed away. And every time he was in the hospital, we could talk because now we confided in each other. And I would ask him, are you afraid of dying? He'd say, yeah, I'm afraid. And I said, well, I'm sure glad that we love each other and that we've resolved everything because I'm going to miss you. So how wonderful.
Yeah, and not everybody can do that.
No.
And not everybody has the courage to consider that. I have to say that I had something similar in that, not that I was so estranged, but I'm an only child. My dad died when I was quite young, so it was my mother, my grandmother, and I. And as I was getting older, my mother and I would sandpaper each other, is what I call it. We just kind of rub each other the wrong way, and loved each other, but I wanted to be free and she wanted to control, and that never bodes well. So, but I gave her a birthday party for her 75th birthday, and part of what I did is I wrote her a life book, and I made up my mind that I was never going to get upset or angry with her again, no matter what. made up my
vow.
mind that it's like she can play the chords. I don't have to do the dance that I used to do, that I'm only going to love her because life is very short.
Good.
And I was really grateful I did that, because I gave her a party in April and she died quite suddenly the following October. But like you,
Yeah.
there was peace. Nothing was left unsaid. Everything was healed.
Yeah.
And so there's a great comfort in that. Of course you miss the person,
Sure.
but you've done that work. And what words of encouragement could you give to people that might be listening that feel estranged from a loved one, that wish they could be friends with it could be a sibling that there's a breach, or even a friend that's been a friend that's a breach. What was it that got you to summon that kind of courage and that intention to do this?
I think I knew that forgiveness was the big issue, that I needed to forgive him and understand him. And somehow when you get yourself to understand somebody, it's amazing what changes. All of a sudden I knew he did not have what it took to have a relationship with me, and that it didn't matter who developed the relationship as long as one of us did. And so I loved him, I forgave him, and I learned to understand him, and it made all the difference in the world.
You know, the other piece I hear in that is you dropped your expectations of who he was supposed to be, and just moved into an acceptance of what was.
He was a damaged person, like so many of us, but nobody ever took the time to understand it or to ask him about it. And when I learned what he had been through, I had empathy for him. I loved him and looked at him differently. I didn't have the expectations. I now said, here's a broken man who hurt his whole life.
Wow.
And we became buds.
That's beautiful. Now let's go to the closing the deli, or walking away from the deli and getting into Disney. Now, where was he still there when you walked away from the deli, or was it after he passed? How did that happen?
No, we were in the deli together, and I was fortunate enough to get an interview at another company that wasn't Disney, Sid and Marty Krofft, and it was my chance to get into the studio world. So I went to him and I said, Dad, I got this great job and I'm taking it. He said, you can't, the deli, this is our dream, this is for you. I'm doing this for you. I said, Dad, this is for you. It's your dream, and I was glad to be here, but now my dream is here and I'm going. So I went and took the job, but I went after work every night, worked the deli. I went every weekend and worked the deli for about a year, and then I went through my transitions in life with an engagement that didn't work, moving to Hawaii. And I came back and continued the studio tour until I got into Disney. And that was the big dream come true.
So you manifested that dream, and you know, tell us some of the work you did. I mean, are there movies that we know that you worked on?
Well, I was mainly in the theme park design. So we were redoing Fantasyland, and the crazy part was my first requested job was to redesign the Dumbo ride.
Oh my gosh, that's like a movie script.
How ironic. Little Dumbo goes to Disney, and my job is to redesign the Dumbo ride.
So given the transformation of everything you did with your father, how was it to do the Dumbo? I mean, did you forgive the past of that too when you did the redesign? How was that?
I think for me at the time it was surprising and exciting. I didn't give much thought to it except years later, realizing how ironic was that. But it was important with my father because we had an open house where you got to bring your family, and my dad wanted to come. Well, that was the turning point in our relationship where he respected me. All of a sudden, I was the greatest son he could have ever had. Now, it had to do with my work, and he was very proud because he didn't think I should pursue this dream. Art's great, but what are you going to do with it? And when he saw that I had made something of it, I felt the acceptance of him that had been missing.
Well, how, you know, it's like a movie script that your family goes to Disneyland. That's where you find your own personal acceptance,
my own belonging.
And then fast forward and you return to that
Yeah.
magic land.
Yeah.
And the happiest place on earth, as they call it.
Right.
And for you and your family,
Yeah.
or you and your dad, it really
sealed the deal, kind
it
of.
did seal the
Yeah,
deal. And
yeah.
so, how was his passing? Were you at his bedside when he died?
I was not. It was right before Christmas, and he was having another attack, and rushed home to get something to eat. He wasn't sure if it was his diabetes that was kicking in or a heart attack, whatever. And it was rather quick. My mom was there. And of course, to lose a parent is the toughest thing. But I think because we had had all this resolve, and we'd had many times to say, I miss you, I love you, goodbye. We said our goodbyes many times, because every heart attack, we didn't know if he would make it. And then when he did, we just got to go on. So.
Well, you know, that's really beautiful, and I've come to learn that I always say I love you and goodbye to everyone, because there's no guarantees. I personally have lost people suddenly as well.
Right.
So it's really always important to say I love you and goodbye, and kind of clear up the unspoken. And I think you've taken us on this beautiful journey of unspoken truth to heartfelt connection. And I so appreciate you sharing your story so openly, because that's a lesson for all of us. I mean, every one of us has a relationship that needs some repair,
Right.
certainly some forgiveness. And I just really want to thank you for, you know, the depth of what you shared tonight.
You're welcome.
And for all the joy that I will never go to Disneyland again without thinking of you, and I'll have to make a special point to see Dumbo.
Get on the ride and ride Dumbo.
I will. So, Jim, as is our custom, we have this book of living love, and we say to live in hearts you leave behind is not to die. So if you would like to inscribe your mom, your dad, or anybody else in this book, please do that.
That would be great.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, I'd like to thank our guest tonight, Jim Sarno. I'd like to thank the crew, Elliot Jacobson, Mike Nicholson, and TVSB. If you'd like to see other episodes of Dying in Grace, please go to YouTube Dying in Grace or our website, www.dyingingrace.com.